Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today. This is the Bodega Cat Book Club Financial Edition, and today we're continuing our reading of Gold Warriors by Sterling and Peggy Seagrave. And the subtitle is called America's Secret Recovery of Yamashita's Gold. So, this book was inspired by current events, if you will, in the financial industry, in particular, precious metals. So there's been a lot of ups and downs, if you will, because of the geopolitical things that are happening. So I thought it would be interesting to read about the, excuse me, to read about the precious metal aspect of the finance, and in particular gold. You know, history is very important and interesting, and I think it's interesting to learn about it, especially the hidden um, stories that we don't hear about, in the major news cycle or whatever, news story, title, whatever. So, anyways, that's the inspiration for this book. Okay, so before we begin, I want to welcome everybody. If you like what we do here, please consider checking out our other book clubs as well. We have our spiritual book clubs on Mondays and then health book clubs on Wednesdays. And we put all the books that we've read in the past as well as our present books on YouTube. And we have it on a playlist so you guys can just download it and listen to it when you're walking your dog or when you're jogging or when you're stuck in traffic. We have other stuff on there as well, not just the book club. So please do check out our YouTube channel and like and subscribe and comment and all that good stuff. And also do consider subscribing to our free monthly newsletter as well. And if you want to support us further, you can buy me a coffee, leave a donation, or check out our merch. We have many different merch for your fur babies, for your kitties and doggies, as well as for humans. So please do check them out. We update our designs periodically as well as put out new designs. So come back often and check them out and get some cute stuff for your little fur babies and yourself. And if you're in the Los Angeles area or visiting the LA area, please do consider coming to our healing center. We have a healing center that we use technologies based on Nikola Tesla's scalar wave research for holistic healing for both domestic cats and dogs and humans. So you could read all about that technology on our website. Learn about what it does and its effectiveness. And also our other services that we provide as well. So, however you support us, we thank you very, very much. And most importantly, thank you for being on this book club journey, because I think reading is a lost art, in my opinion. And reading does make you smarter, in my opinion. So, kudos for you guys for coming on this journey with us and sticking with us. Um, and I hope you're enjoying it. So, okay. So let us begin. This is chapter 5, and this will be part 2. Now, the book has a lot of endnotes at the end of the book. So what I'll do is I'll read like a page or maybe a section, and then I'll go to the end of the book to read the endnotes. So that's kind of like our format. So if you have a book, you could follow with us there. If not, you could follow with us here on camera. And I'm just going to move the camera in a little bit here since I can't see. Ah, there you go. The cameras are great. It enlarges the enlarges the print so I could read. Okay. All right, here we go. This is chapter 5, part 2. By early 1943, America had solved its torpedo problems, and the submarine blockade just north of the Philippines became nearly impenetrable. Therefore, much of the plunder would have to remain in the Philippines. This posed a new challenge to Prince Chichibu and his advisors. The solution was obvious, for gold is a curious commodity. It does not have to change hands. Once you take physical possession of gold bullion, you can put it in any secure place and leave it there for decades or centuries, providing no one else can remove it. Golden Lily could hide all the gold and platinum in deep vaults in the Philippines or Indonesia. It could remain asleep there as secure as if it were in the Matsushiro bunker. Even if Japan were invaded and occupied by the enemy, the location of this bullion would remain secret. When the world lost interest, individual vaults could be recovered discreetly. This was the argument put forth by Prince Chichibu's advisors, including Japan's best financial brains at the time, known as the Four Heavenly Kings. Engineering deep vaults was not a problem. In Japan, tunneling had been done for 1,000 years. Every domain lord had earthworks, tunnels, and bunkers. In the late 19th century, railway tunnels had been dug, and mining for coal and other minerals had become a major industry in Japan. So the Subatsu had employed tens of thousands of Japanese men and women as miners. They were now in the army, so Japanese soldiers were inveterate tunnelers. Give them a gun, and they dug a hole. America developed flamethrowers primarily to burn them out of these holes, which often continued for miles. No better example exists than the island of Okinawa, where tunnels dug during the war connected natural caverns to blockhouses and gun emplacements. Chinese tombs dotting Okinawa were transformed into pillboxes connected by side tunnels to this underground defective labyrinth. The geology of the Philippines provided many natural caverns, and Manila was full of hiding places. During 4 centuries of Spanish colonial rule, elaborate tunnels had been dug under the city by prisoners, and under American rule, these were expanded and reinforced by the U.S. Army. The tunnels were linked, in some cases, to churches, cathedrals, and monasteries with catacombs, or to Spanish forts with elaborate dungeons. In 1571, the Spaniards had moved their headquarters to Manila from Cebu, taking over the fortress of the local Muslim ruler, Dato Soliman. Renaming it Fort Santiago, the Spaniards enclosed it in a massive wall of earthworks, encompassing 60 hectares of adjoining land. They called the whole complex intramurals within the walls, and soon added 2 great cathedrals and numerous government buildings. At that time, intramurals lay on the south bank of the Pasig River estuary, where the river flowed into Manila Bay. So they dug a broad moat around the walls and turned intramurals into a man-made island. Since then, the water's edge had withdrawn and the moat became a park. Spanish soldiers, traders, and priests all lived inside the walls of intramurals with their Filipino servants. Slaves and prisoners alike were put to work digging tunnels beneath intramurals to store wine, brandy, manchego cheese, chorizo, serrano ham, olives, grain, silver, gold, and gunpowder. Churches and monastic orders dug catacombs for storage and for burial crypts. This underground maze offered Prince Chichibu a ready-made hiding place for war loot. The Kempeitai had made Fort Santiago their headquarters, so security in intramurals was tight. It would be a simple matter to wall off an existing tunnel or to dig side tunnels, which could be sealed and cleverly camouflaged so nobody would ever guess treasure was hidden inside. The most pressing problem facing Chichibu was how to move the treasure discreetly to intramurals from bayfront warehouses. Convoys of army trucks would arouse local curiosity. Manila was crowded with homeless refugees, peddlers, prostitutes, street urchins, gangsters, hustlers, and riffraff. There was too big an audience. The solution was to dug a new tunnel directly from Pier 15 to Fort Santiago, where it could join the existing Spanish-era tunnels under intramurals. Work began in early May 1942. Great quantities of excavated rock and soil were dumped into Manila Bay as landfill in the Ermita districts just south of Pier 15. The digging was done by thousands of POWs, plus slave labor from Korea, China, and the Philippines. Mel Gutierrez was only 8 years old when he was taken there to dig, with all other able-bodied males from a barrio in Batangas City. Little Mel was forced to work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, for 2 years. Kapatay officers in plain clothes made sure he filled his daily quota. On slim rations, many diggers keeled over dead. By May 1943, 35 miles of primary tunnels were completed, wide enough for two army trucks to pass in opposite directions, all of it lined with steel reinforced concrete. One end of the tunnel was at Santa Lucia Gate in the Spanish Wall around Intramurals, 10 miles as the crow flies from General MacArthur's pre-war headquarters at Fort McKinley. Most of the tunnel was relatively shallow, dug in the clay immediately beneath intramurals, remaining just above the water table and basaltic bedrock. But Chichibu's engineers made an exception to the Pasig River, where they dug down through the bedrock, creating a watertight tunnel under the river. All in all, this was an unexpected feat of engineering, unknown to the outside world. In 1975, it was still possible to drive from one end of the 35-mile long tunnel network to the other, as Robert Curtis learned when he discovered the tunnel while reverse engineering Japanese treasure site maps. But today, its existence is unknown to most Filipinos. All but two of the entrances have been blocked by more recent construction. Through the summer of 1942, while the tunnel was being dug, Chichibu and other princes toured potential treasure vault sites around Manila. They traveled in a convoy of heavy six-wheeled Model 93 staff cars, accompanied by motorcycle outriders. These limousines drew a lot of attention. Developed originally from a pre-war Studebaker or Hudson chases, they were open touring cars with canvas tops folding back behind the rear seat. They had two rear axles providing two rear wheels on each side. The white sidewall tires were mounted on chromed spoked wheels. Behind each front wheel, the fender dipped in nestle a spare tire. On the right front fender was a stubby flagstaff with a red 14-petal chrysanthemum on a white field. The crest of first-tier imperial princes. The crest of the emperor has 16 petals. The Model 93 came in gasoline and diesel versions, rated respectively at 68 and 70 horsepowers, but given its 7,500-pound weight, the beast could only do a top speed of 60 miles per hour. Okay, let's see what our endnotes say here. We'll start 64. Okay. Oh, we got some short endnotes for the remaining of the chapter. Okay. So the note about Mel Gutierrez, you could find that in Young, Slave Wages from Bayview, July 5th, 2000, online. Today, few Filipinos know that the Great Tunnel System still exists. Most entrances have been covered over by new construction. The note about Japanese Army staff cars, this comes from 40 Japanese Army Handbook. The note about the treasure sites in and around Manila. Many color and black and white photographs of recovery efforts made by Marcos in the mid-1970s are included on our CDs. In addition, nearly 100 pages of correspondence, contract, and discussions of these treasure sites are also reproduced on our CDs. Okay. Okay. All right, continuing. Behind the princes came Chichibu's military staff and engineers in 6 ordinary Nissan sedans, which looked like all the ugly black sedans made everywhere in the world in the 1930s. Following them were the 3 truckloads of heavily armed imperial guards. The princes were especially interested in Manila Cathedral, St. Augustine Church, Fort Santiago, Fort McKinley, and Santo Tomas University. They hoped to find a way to create a treasure vault at each of these historic monuments and to do this invisibly by connecting the vault with a branch shaft to the new main tunnel. Chichibu's engineers had prepared a large-scale map of Manila on which every potential site was marked. The map showed the route of the main tunnel and indicated where it would be necessary to construct smaller access tunnels to each future vault. A main consideration was to avoid having vaults discovered accidentally by a direct hit from artillery or aerial bomb or by future construction on the same site. As the Geneva Convention forbade the bombing of hospitals, schools, prisoners of war camps, churches, and historic monuments, creating treasure vaults in those places provided the best insurance. As a further precaution, each vault would be built at a depth of around 90 feet, too deep for a bomb to penetrate. These vaults might be discovered during future construction involving excavation, pile driving, or drilling of water. So they chose sites under historic monuments that would be off limits to future building uh, sites projects and other sites near existing water supplies, figuring no one drills a well next to another well. Some choices seem oddly poetic, such as those near large acacia trees. Chichibu's brother, Prince Mikasa, was the family expert on Middle Eastern affairs. Acacia wood was said to have been used to build the Ark of the Covenant and was mentioned in the Bible as a sign of messianic resurgence. In practical terms, acacias have deep roots and thus are unlikely to be killed by drought or uprooted by typhoon. One of the first sites the princes visited was General MacArthur's headquarters at Fort McKinley. A close inspection was made of MacArthur's air raid shelter, 60 feet below a grass-covered quadrangle, in front of the headquarters buildings. 2 flights of concrete steps led down to 3 large reinforced concrete rooms. The officers' club at Fort McKinley was built on one end of a gently sloping ridge where you could enjoy cooling breezes from the distant sea. On the one side of this ridge, were tennis courts. On the other side, a parade ground. Wow. It was decided to dig Golden Lily's main tunnel beneath the parade ground, then into the hill below the officers' club. At the bottom of the concrete stairs leading down to MacArthur's bomb shelter, the new tunnel would take a jog to the left for 100 feet to a point directly under the officers' club swimming pool. There, at a depth of 90 feet below the pool, Chichibu ordered excavation of a small treasure room. Because the hill was solid rock, there was no need for shoring. Inside intramurals, it was decided to place several treasure vaults at St. Augustine Church and the monastery next door. Both were built in the 16th century during the reign of King Philip II, who had sent the ill-fated Spanish Armada to Elizabethan England. The church was built of cut stone, quarried east of Manila. Beneath the church were catacombs holding remains of priests, nobles, and wealthy commoners. In the courtyard of the cloister, a garden of tropical plants uh, surrounded a fountain shaped like a huge stone flower. In arched passageways on each side, the walls were hung with 26 large oil paintings, 6 feet wide and 8 feet tall, portraying priests tending their Filipino flock. Beside the church was the monastery. When the princess visited it in 1942, the monastery was crowded with religious relics, statues of saints, and displays of ornate priestly vestments. In recibidor, or main reception room, was 150 feet long by 50 wide, with a grand staircase at the far end. In one wall, a narrow staircase led down to the catacombs. Chichibu's plan for St. Augustine quickly took shape. The stone fountain in the cloister of the church was 400 meters from the Santa Lucia Gate, where the main Golden Lily Tunnel began. It was decided to dig a branch tunnel from the gate to a treasure chamber directly beneath this fountain. The vault would be only 30 feet square, packed tight with gold and artworks. Like the vault under MacArthur's swimming pool, this under the fountain at St. Augustine would be secure long into the future. From under the fountain, under spur tunnel would be dug under church catacombs, directly below the crypt of Padre Juan de Macias. A vault would be created there measuring 20 feet by 30, lined with reinforced concrete. When these two vaults were filled with treasure, the entrances to their access tunnels would be sealed with a super hard ceramic concrete compound and made invisible. Golden Lily employed Japanese ceramic experts who were able to produce concrete of extraordinary hardness. By molding a cement plug to resemble a normal section of tunnel wall, tinting the composite with pigments of local soil, the entrances blended perfectly with their surroundings. Oops, sorry about that. Nobody would ever guess that an entrance to a branch tunnel existed. Robert Curtis found them because he had the original maps. The recibidor in the monastery adjoining St. Augustine Church also became a treasure repository. When Spaniards first built the huge room to support the ceiling and the weight of additional floors and roof above, their masons installed a massive cut stone arch 2/3 of the way back. Chichibu found a pile of the same pale gray cut stones in the grounds behind the church. Using these stones and a similar mortar, Golden Lily masons filled in the arch so that it became a solid wall. This closed off 1/3 of the recibidor, creating a treasure room measuring 20 feet by 50 feet. The recibidor was not a public space, it was meant only for inhabitants of the monastery. As such, not many people knew what it looked like. However, current occupants of the monastery would notice that the room had been changed. So the Kamputai was given the job of killing all the priests and church laborers who were familiar with the recibidor. Meanwhile, church archives and records were searched for all related documents and drawings. These were burned and the archivists stabbed to death. When American forces retook Manila, 45 bodies dressed in clerical garb were found in shallow graves in the basement of the monastery. Most had their hands tied behind their backs and had been killed with bayonets to avoid attracting attention with gunshots. Wow. I wonder if there's a special place in hell for people who kill priests. Okay, let's read the endnotes in the back. Let's see, what page did we read here? 67, 68. Okay. All right, so the note about the bodies in the Manila Monastery. Bodies in the Manila Monastery discovered by American troops in Intramuros. You could find that in Robert Trumbull in the New York Times, November 7, 1945. The article is quoted online at www.artist Imperial.zq.com. Oh, that was it. Interesting. Okay. Wow, that was quick and painless. Okay. In a flash of good humor, Chichibu led the other princes out to the cloister passage hung with huge oil paintings, stopping before one titled Saint Augustine Blessing a Native. The saint had his right hand raised as if he was gesturing in the direction of the new Recibador treasure vault. Chichibu ordered his aides to have an extra finger painted on the hand, pointing directly at the disguised entrance. The engineer who prepared the construction drawing for the site used the saint's six finger as the fulcrum point. This became known as the six finger site. Next, the princes turned their attention to nearby Manila Cathedral, where they selected two sites. One vault was dug beneath a huge acacia tree in front of the cathedral, a second directly beneath the altar. The princes were certain that in the future nobody would excavate beneath the altar. Both vaults were excavated by way of a branch tunnel coming from under the stone fountain at St. Augustine Church. At Santo Tomas University at Rizal Avenue, they found a large basement room and decided to close off one end to make a substantial treasure chamber. This building was safe from bombs, for it was an internment camp for American civilians, including men and children, women and children. The Red Cross notified the U.S. military, so the university was off limits to bombers. In subsequent days, the princes toured all the buildings and grounds comprising Fort Santiago. As Kapitai headquarters, work could be done anywhere. Several hiding places were chosen. One would be under the big fountain in Fort Santiago's front park. It would be approached by a branch tunnel from the acacia tree vault at Manila Cathedral. In the 1980s, when treasure hunters drilled an exploratory 3-inch hole beneath this fountain, the gas of decomposed corpses sickened them. Allied POWs had been buried alive in that end of the 35-mile tunnel in 1943. Fort Santiago had to be closed for a week while the smell dissipated. The second hiding place at Fort Santiago was under an acacia tree in the Spanish officers' courtyard, beside a monument to the martyred 19th century poet and novelist Jose Rizal, wrongly executed by the Spaniards for sedition. This vault was recovered in 1985 by a military unit loyal to Imelda Marcos. A spur led to a third vault beneath the Bastion de San Miguel. Back in 1942, more than 4,000 American and Filipino prisoners were confined in the dungeons of Fort Santiago, where they were interrogated before being put to death. The smell of thousands of unwashed prisoners and moldering corpses gave the fort its characteristic aroma. A mass grave by the Pasig River was already full in 1942, so the Kempeitai trucked most bodies to the bayfront, loaded them on a barge, loaded them on a barge, and dumped them in Manila Bay. Oh my goodness, these people are horrible. Tides carried the corpses past Corregidor and into South China Sea. The main structure of the fort had 3 dungeons, each on a lower level. The deepest, basement 3, was below the surface of the Pasig River. Each day, 200 men at a time were herded into this dungeon, and valves opened to let water in. It was a terrible way to die, starving men drowning in panic, but it saved ammunition. When they were dead, other prisoners used old bilge pumps, cleared the water. Basement 2 on the north side was much larger, 60 feet by 120 feet, and known as the execution chamber. Most prisoners at Fort Santiago were murdered individually by the Kampataye here in the course of interrogation. Imperial war loot had priority by so Prince Chichibu ordered the dungeon emptied and hosed down to remove the smell. When this was done, he returned for an inspection. Here, Chichibu ordered a pit made below water level. While the pit was dug, it took several hundred POWs to maintain a wall of sandbags and to operate hand pumps against the influx of river water. The bottom of the pit uh, then was covered with old railway ties and slabs of a red-hued marble laid on top of the wood. Wood crates were placed on the marble slabs, and the crates were filled with gold bars. The POWs who had dug the pit were then murdered. The dirt they had removed was piled over their bodies, and a concrete slab was poured, filling it to the usual level of the basement floor. Basement 3 was next. When Dato Solomon's fort was first modified, the Spaniards had created 4 air shafts. The largest led down to the deepest dungeon. It was now enlarged by Golden Lily engineers and reinforced. This became the resting place for Mosler safes taken from various Manila banks and the Intendencia, the pre-war central bank of the Philippines. The same safes emptied by Colonel Willoughby in early 1942 when the government and private gold was taken to Corregidor. While still empty, 22 of these big safes were lowered down the biggest air shaft to its dirt floor. There, the safes were filled with rough gold chunks cut off 75 kilobars. The safes were then locked as in basement 2, a 1-foot thick slab of concrete was poured over the whole assembly. POWs began filling in the vent with loose rock and dirt when another Mosler safe was delivered. Hurriedly, this one was lowered onto the backfill, where more dirt and rocks were added, and another slab of concrete was poured. On the flat roof of the fort, the top of the biggest air shaft was rebuilt and sealed with some of the original stones quarried in the Spanish era, so nobody would guess it was there. In the late 1970s, these Mosler safes were recovered for President Marcos by a team headed by his protege, Dr. Gil Gadi. One of the remaining small air shafts had boxes of gold bars lowered into it, followed by oil drums of gold and silver coins. This shaft was then filled with superfine sand, packed down hard, and the shaft capped just below roof level with a 5-foot thick slab of reinforced concrete. If anybody dug his way into the air shaft from the sides, the superfine sand would cave in and bury him alive. Some glass bottles of cyanide, easily broken, were mixed into the sand. 2 other stashes completed the Fort Santiago hiding places. One was in an underground room that once had been used to store provisions for the Spanish garrison. Another was a rainwater cistern in the foundations of Solomon's palace. All this planning by Prince Chichibu and his engineers took many weeks to evolve into Blue Series engineering drawings for the construction phase. Eventually, coded recovery maps were drawn by Japanese cartographers. At some future date, these Red Series recovery maps would guide Japanese teams back to each site, give them the fulcrum point by which to judge depths and other data essential to avoid booby traps and make a recovery. Stylistically, these Red Series maps were uniquely Japanese, done in a form of caricatures familiar to anyone who had served in Japan's armed forces. Terrain features such as mountains, rivers, trees, and roads were represented as if they were drawn on a chalkboard. Each map was marked preeminently with what appeared to be the overall value of the treasure contained in that particular vault. For example, 111 billion yen, 777 billion yen, 888 billion yen, always with the yen mark. And interesting numerology, 1111, 777, and 888, triple digit angel numbers. Just a side note there, my little side note. Okay, continue. In fact, like all the other map markings, this is only a code. To know how much actually was hidden there, you had to have the key. For example, it might be necessary to remove 6 zeros. All other signs and symbols in the maps are similarly confusing. All you could assume was that a 777 site was bigger than a 111 site. These maps bore notes written in different scripts, including kana, syllabic alphabet, and kanji, which is Chinese ideograms. Some also bore English inscriptions written by Japanese engineers trained at universities in Britain and the United States. One encryption key was a flag flying to the left or right, indicating whether the map needed to be looked at straight on or reversed in a mirror, a clock face indicating depths and bearings, and a fulcrum point indicating where all measurements for that site began. Without one of these maps showing the fulcrum point, you would never know where to dig. 30 years later, for example, President Marcos assigned 2,000 soldiers to search the 35 miles of tunnels under Manila for over 2 years before giving up empty-handed, except for one 75-kilo gold bar found in the back of an army truck abandoned in the tunnel. Marcos never understood the maps. Such technical details obscure the tragic human cost. Allied POWs working under the grimmest conditions dug these tunnels and vaults. For special jobs, Korean and Chinese slave laborers were used because they could not communicate directly with Allied POWs working in the same place. Without exception, eyewitnesses told us that each time a treasure vault was filled and sealed, the POWs and slave laborers were buried alive inside to guarantee their silence. Shinto priests gave each site their blessing, waving wands of tree branches, making sure the spirits of the dead would guard the site. The real purpose of this mass murder was tight security. Thousands of Dutch, British, Australian, Canadian, New Zealand, and POWs and American POWs vanished below ground in Manila, never again to see the light of day. At one site alone in Teresa, southeast of Manila, eyewitnesses attest to 1,200 Allied POWs being buried alive. See Chapter 11. When Teresa was opened by Robert Curtis in October 1975, his efforts to collect hundreds of dog tags among human remains in the tunnel to identify the victims were thwarted by security men who forced him at gunpoint to leave the site. By August 1942, the rains had come and Chichibu had been in Manila for 6 months, living in the Manila Hotel penthouse of General MacArthur. Many of the general's personal belongings remained in place, including his books. The windows overlooked Pier 15 and the splendid sunsets over Bataan across the Great Bay. But Chichibu fled to Singapore, where he was less bothered by his tuberculosis. One measure of Japan's total plunder is that all these treasure vaults being created in Manila, plus the tunnels at Corregidor, were not enough. Other vaults were being dug in Mindanao, in Mindoro, and other islands in the archipelago, and in the mountains north of Manila. Another imperial prince was hard at work, excuse me, enlarging natural caverns to create the biggest treasure vaults of the war outside Japan. Okay, end of chapter 5. Let's read the rest of the endnotes. Here. Okay. All right. My allergies acting up a little bit. Excuse me. Okay. Where were we? Okay, so the note about the six finger sight. See chapter 11. Curtis discovered what has become known as the six finger sight. The note about Dr. Gadi's role in the recovery. See Chapter 9. Documents and memos found in the Presidential Security Command headquarters after Marcos lost power are reproduced on our CDs. The note about the Imperial treasure maps. We reproduced several photos and an explanatory drawing of these on our CDs. And the note about Prince Chichibu in the Philippines for 6 months. Prince Chichibu was in the Philippines for periods of 6 months, coinciding with the dry season. Sources in his entourage confirmed his presence in Manila in mid-1942, again at various locations during the spring of 1943, and he was positively identified at the Piquian River Bridge in Nueva Vizcaya during the winter of 1944 to 1945 when he encountered his first cousin, Prince Takeda. MacArthur was outraged when he retook Manila and discovered that the departing Japanese had burned and looted his apartments, although for reasons that are not clear, many of his most precious possessions survived by the war and were returned to him in Tokyo during the occupation. Wow. Burned other people's stuff. Hmm. Anyways, very interesting section, isn't it? I hope you enjoyed that. I guess I have things to say, but I'm not going to say it. It's not going to be very nice. Okay, so we will stop here, and I hope you enjoyed this little reading, and we will see you next time in our next book club. Okay, bye-bye now.